So I saw this on The Verge. Good news source. Beanstalk robbed for, and this number's old, 180 million. Beanstalk robbed for 180 million. So how did this happen? We're on a streak. Every week there's $100 million stolen. This one is a flash loan related to a DAO token. So what's going on here? Let's draw this out. So we've got some project that's going to be some type of a DAO. And this DAO is going to make decisions. And there's a lot of DAOs. First of all, DAO is not really a DAO. Usually it's not really decentralized, but some type of organization that uses voting. Oh, and PS, they have a lot of money. Okay. Does anybody else know a different type of DAO that has a lot of assets, trillions of dollars of assets? What's the biggest DAO that exists? What is distributed? What is autonomous? What is organization? An organization means a specific entity that has control of assets. They have voting involved, there's votes, they have access to a lot of money, and the votes can be binding on their assets and cause them to spend it however anybody wants. US Congress. US Congress is a distributed autonomous organization that is signing authority over trillions of dollars, and they are not afraid to spend it. So the way it works is there's Congress, and they have lots of money. And then what you do to get the money out of the Congress is you vote. You vote the money out. So there's delegates, there's representatives, there's voting, there's checks and balances. But in general, US Congress has broad authority to just spend the money on whatever the f it wants to spend the money on. They can spend it helicopter drop. They can just mail it to everybody who had COVID. They can mail it to people who didn't have COVID. They can mail people to working. They can mail it to people that aren't working. They can mail it for any reason or no reason at all. And so that is US Congress. Now, what does that have to do with electronic DAOs? Well, they're literally the same exact thing. Business models don't change. Business practices change. Business models never change in humanity. They just never change. So we can find things, we can find people that have talked about US Congress and its spending authority, and we can directly apply it to DAOs. And luckily, there's been a lot written on this topic. So here's the quote. A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the majority discovers it can vote itself, largesse, out of the public treasury. And that's exactly what happened with Beanstalk. So Beanstalk is having a lot of assets under management. So let's look them up. 300 million, I've seen 75 million. But basically what's going on is they have a lot of assets. Somebody gets 51% of the vote, and then they just take everything away. Now, the thing that's special about nowadays is that it's so easy to buy votes because the votes are for sale. This is what staking means. When we talk about staking, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people giving other people access to their tokens for that 20% yield, right? You're going to stake, you're going to farm, you make liquidity pools. That's what you're doing. You're allowing other people to take your assets for a short period of time. And what they're doing with those assets is they're taking them, and they're taking 51% of them, and they're using it to vote. And the vote is to just take all the money out of the treasury and give it to themselves. This is a well-known strategy. I'm surprised that they didn't think of this, and somehow these projects get hundreds of millions of dollars, and they don't have anybody to think about these type of things. So because they're focused on whatever they do with all that money. You can find a lot of these projects. You can find them on Compound Finance or whatever other liquidity pools that are out there. And you can just buy all the tokens and you can do this yourself. In fact, there's no risk because if you're using AVE or other flash loans, you're not putting any money up front. You're not spending any ether. And the transaction only goes through if it's successful. So you either get $100 million or you don't spend any money. Pure arbitrage. Maybe that's what we should call this. Vote arbitrage.
Even any legal risk, is there?
I don't see any legal risk for this, but I'm not an authority on that. I mean, my opinion is if you read the yellow paper or you read Bitcoin or read anything, these are all games. And so you play the game to win. I don't see any reason why this should be treated a different way. By default, it's a game. Now, if it's going to be a registered securities broker and they just happen to build a registered security brokerage on top of a game that's a joke, like blockchain, then maybe the government will support them.
There's a question from Rolson. Doesn't this break DeFi?
There is no DeFi. So I actually want to go create a proof of concept proving that Compound can just take everybody's money all at once. So it used to be, but I'm not sure if the new version is. Well, the answer is nothing's DeFi. But yes, this breaks DeFi. It was already broken, and it's still broken afterwards. So, but it's really a matter of degree. I mean, nothing is really decentralized, so we go into that too. Yeah, I mean, I love these discussions. Bitcoin is centralized. Yes, I mean everything is centralized. Bitcoin is much more decentralized than Ethereum because there's no upgrades. There's no Vitalik for Bitcoin. The Vitalik of Bitcoin is when the mining farms decide to upgrade for some reason, and that's pretty rare. Ethereum is about to get a lot more centralized with proof of stake. So there's a mechanism there. The slashing mechanism is really painful to claim that Ethereum is decentralized. It's really just going to cut that up. Bitcoin's a little more abstract to think about that. In my opinion, Bitcoin's worth nothing. It's worth negative money, and it should be illegal everywhere because of the carbon. What network is most decentralized? Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to say Bitcoin because everything else is tightly held. The smaller the network, the less people using it, the more there's a pie of the users, right? And so for a lot of the new network, it's like it's just one person using it. They might pretend like they have 100 nodes or 1,000 nodes, but they're just running one web service to spin up 1,000 nodes. They control all of them. So that's unfortunate. And obviously they want to show like a lot of people are using something. So they'll make 1,000 nodes that they're all run by the same person. Happens all the time. Just like Ronin, Axie Infinity. Axie Infinity should not be running that many nodes on the network. They shouldn't have any nodes. It should be entirely owned by the community, incentivized somehow with some fees or whatever. But they only had 9 nodes running that bridge. And that was a major project. And yet again, hacked hundreds of millions of dollars. Yes. So there's a specific thing about proof of stake. Why is proof of stake even less decentralized than proof of work? Here's why. Okay, so here is a blockchain. A fundamental problem in blockchain is these blocks need to be created by somebody, and there might be a fork. Now, this fork could be a couple things. It could be 2 people making a block at the same time. This could be a network upgrade. This could be Bitcoin Cash. It could be any of those things. So for proof of work, there's a very strong reason you don't want to just fork maliciously. How much does it cost you to fork Ethereum and keep it going and maybe compete for like the main chain? What does that cost? Australian dollars.
So today, couldn't you just fork at any time, but no one would care?
That's a hard fork. I'm talking about a fork, which is still compatible with the existing network and may possibly become canonical. It might become the network. So this is a soft fork. The answer is the same cost as raking a normal block. It is the block reward, which is 2. Okay, so using a very small sample size, in 10 minutes, there was $1,000 of... Okay, so we can assume that a block costs $6,000 to mint, and that's 8,000 Australian dollars. How long is a block good for? 15 seconds. So it costs 32,000 Australian dollars per minute to fork Ethereum blockchain. This is a mechanism here that's going to prevent people from forking wrongly. Like they're not going to make a wrong fork here and spend 32,000 Australian dollars unless they think that their fork is going to be the right fork. So if they're going to do funny business like hiding transactions, changing the order of stuff, they're going to spend a lot of money running that fork. And there's a risk that other people won't accept it. And there's the 51%. They need 51% of the network power to do that. So I'm not giving you the full math here. I mean, it's close to that, but we're on the order of tens of thousands of Australian dollars per minute to sustain a fork. That's why when you try to take money out of Coinbase, it says you got to wait 15 blocks because 15 blocks is like 4 minutes, which is like $250,000 Australian dollars. So if the amount you're withdrawing is less than $250,000 Australian dollars, it wouldn't make sense for you to blow $250,000 Australian dollars to trick Coinbase into double spending you, 100,000 Australian dollars. It just doesn't make sense. That is some of the security here is based on the things that make sense and things that don't make sense. Okay, now proof of stake, the mechanism is different. So for Algorand has, a designated transaction verifier at each block. They have a couple. And so you have to stake, and then you have to be online, and then you can perform the block. Okay, that's great. But then there's this other mechanism, part of Ethereum, where there has to be some penalty, there has to be some cost for not following the rules of Ethereum. So we compare the cost you have to spend versus the benefit, and that's how we assume this thing is secure. Proof of stake, how does this work? There's a mechanism built into proof of stake called slashing. And what that means is, if there's one canonical network, and if you either have to endorse, so the split will happen, there will be some type of a split. And people either have to accept this network or they have to accept this network. And the whole point is the community should pick one. Eventually, it's got to pick one. For proof of work, the way that they pick one is one of these two people is going to get tired of fighting, and it's going to cost a lot of money. So the 51%, everybody understands that. Proof of stake is different. There's slashing. So what happens is you have to put your money behind either this or this. And if the other one wins, you lose all your money. And right now, I think it's 32 Ether, which is $100,000. So every validator has $100,000. And if they ever go with a hard fork, they will lose all that money. So what does that mean? That means that every time Vitalik and Ethereum Foundation decides that you should upgrade your client, you got two choices. You either do what he says, or you don't do what he says. And one of those decisions will cost you $100,000. That is the new network. So it is directly hard coding in Vitalik. Compare this to the DAO before, Ethereum Classic. Back in the day, there was somebody decided we're going to fork Ethereum because Vitalik made the wrong choice in stealing everybody's money to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, Australian. What happened was somebody forked it and they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. This fork is the new Ethereum. You guys can run that fork, but we're going to run this fork. And we think that this network is so good that other people should be working on this network. You should have nodes running on our network, and you should totally ignore this network. This is the real network. And actually, it kind of more looks like this. It looks more like this because this is what happened with the DAO getting shut down. This is what actually happened. And then Vitalik came and changed history. So Vitalik was really the hard fork. So if you don't change anything, if you keep the old software, that would not be the history that we have today for Ethereum. But if Vitalik had to mess around, had to change it, and then he rewrote history, and this is the version. Which version would you support? With Ethereum 2, I know it's not called Ethereum 2, Ethereum plus proof of stake, there's a slacking mechanism that makes this much more centralized because it prevents two versions of the network existing at the same time. That's the answer. And the Ethereum Foundation decided that, well, this is still decentralized because anybody can fork Ethereum. All they need to do is fork it and then name it something else because you can't call it Ethereum anymore. And make a different network that's incompatible with this network. You need to make new network rules. Well, that's kind of weird. So what Ethereum Foundation is saying is that every time they come out with an upgrade, everybody must accept it. And if you don't accept it, they might sue you for using the word Ethereum to describe the old network, because that would be, you don't have the right to use the Ethereum trademark. P.S. Newsflash. And then when Ethereum comes out with another version, you have to use that one, or else they might sue you again. They decide who owns what money. That's what I call centralized. Do you think there's an inverse relationship between centralization and the good for the environment? Well, specifically for Ethereum, yes, just because that's an implementation detail. They could have designed proof of stake a different way, but the way that they designed it is really centralized. But yeah, so there's no fundamental relationship between decentralization and bad for the environment. What do you think about the blockchain trilemma? Okay, so let me get a nice picture for that. This is an iron triangle, cannot be broken. So you can pick two, you can pick one. It's really hard to have scalability and security. If something's scalable and fast, how fast are we talking? Are we talking, sub-second, something that can be done quickly? The internet moves faster than a second. You can transact money less than 1 second. If you're playing a game and you're shooting, the bullet gets there within a second. What is the reason we use different servers when we play video games, especially shooting games? Why do we connect to a nearby server? That's right, ping times. Ping times directly affect how fast your bullet when you shoot, if you aim, if you miss, or if you hit it. Or your rocket launches, and rockets are even slower than bullets. So there's a ping time. Well, what's ping time? Ping time is the speed of light. So the fundamental problem with blockchain is the speed of light. Why is there a speed limit? Why does the speed of light matter? Because you have to get one data from here to here, from Australia to New York. Okay, well, what route is it going to take? Is it going to go through California? No. The route for blockchain has to go through the whole network. So it has to go from Australia to Antarctica, back to Europe, has to go through the network topology of blockchain, which is really slow. That's why Ethereum is 15 seconds. 15 seconds is just enough time where the transaction can go through, it can go all across the world, and then it can get to the other side without the other side having already accepted a different block. If you're an engineer, we know this problem because we work with the speed of light on Ethernet. You got Ethernet, it's how long can the cord be? So you got the bits going this way, you got the bits going that way, and they have to not collide. They got to agree, when do I talk, when do you talk? So Ethernet, 100 base T, gigabit Ethernet, 10 gigabit Ethernet, directly affected by the speed of light. And blockchain happens to have a lot more wires because it's secure. So the security here is how many nodes are involved, how many decision makers are there involved, how many people are voting on finality, how many people can make blocks, order the transactions. Every one of those people in the network is increasing the speed of light. Now, when your topology is star topology, when there's one decision maker, everybody sends their email to Google, Google sends the email to the next person. That can run immediately. Real-time communication platforms, such as first-person shooters, send all their data to one server, and then it broadcasts the data out. So the speed, the ping time, the round-trip ping time is from you to server and back. And we assume the server is instantaneous, which is close enough. So it resolves all the bullets and the hits and the kills, and then it sends it right back out. But blockchain, you have to go through every route through the blockchain. And remember, there's thousands of nodes. So there's a couple ways to solve this. One is we could lay out our blockchain topology. We're going to need to make this into a YouTube because I need graphics here. The network topology of blockchain could be optimized by reducing the dimensionality of the network. So what that means is that you physically only connect to people that are near you, right? So if you're in China, you only connect to people in Japan. And if you're in Europe, you only connect to people that are in Europe. And you have a couple people at the edge of Europe connect to the US. And so if we lay it out in a two-dimensional way, then the information, that is the fastest way to get data across the network to the other place. The problem is that you don't want to do that because a two-dimensional network, low dimensionality of your network for network topology is also the easiest way to execute an eclipse attack, which is where you segment the network or you cut people off. So when you run a blockchain, you want to have lots of connections all over the place, which also means that because there's so many connections, it's slower to get data from one side of the network to the other. You're not just going around the globe, you're going around the globe back and forth a few times. That's why the speed of light is an impact. So there's a direct contradiction between decentralization and security and speed. Is there a way you could lose all your money on the Bitcoin network? So there's only two ways that's going to happen. Either A, you authorize it, or B, the entire network decides that they're going to accept something different as a signature for your account. Now that sounds weird. That's a hard fork. So the whole network is going to need to hard fork to accept a new special transaction that's going to take away the Bitcoin in your account. Second way this would happen is if people would agree that the transactions never came into your account. Now that one's actually easier to do. Why? Because that would simply require transaction reordering. So we could take the entire existing Bitcoin network. We could forget the transaction where the tokens came into your account, the Bitcoins came into your account. And at that same time, that person could burn the Bitcoin or send it somewhere else. Now today, that would be a double spend. It wouldn't work. So in the way that the history of Bitcoin works today, the transactions came in. If somebody double spend the money, the Bitcoin you already got, that fizzles. But if we were able to rewrite the history of Bitcoin, go back in time, insert that transaction before the Bitcoin came to your account, then yeah, your Bitcoin wouldn't exist. This is kind of like Back to the Future. Marty is messing with his parents. Mom's got his crush on him, and then he starts disappearing. That's exactly what we're talking about, going back in time and changing that. Now, we happen to know what that would cost. That would cost the same amount as all the Bitcoin rewards for the block miners since then to now, right? So that would be a substantial amount of Bitcoin. Substantial amount of money, probably not going to happen either. So you're safe there. Now, the last way you could lose your Bitcoin, two more ways, is if there was a network upgrade. So the network upgrade could be, again, everybody would have to agree on it, and it might not hurt you specifically, but it might have some other unfavorable to you mechanism where other people keep their Bitcoin and you don't. So it could either specifically zero out your TX from the database, or it could have some other weird effect. Now, the last way to lose all your money on Bitcoin is to get blocklisted. So, like Russia, all the Russian oligarchs are on a block list, and all their Bitcoin accounts are blocklisted. So if you run a transaction, if you run an exchange, you're not allowed to transact for the Russian oligarchs. Now, would you really say that your money's gone? Not really, because you would just use cash, and then it would go to somebody else. You would through whatever mechanisms there are, and you would probably still have no problem getting the money out. Might be slower, might take some time. There's a limit to the transaction volume on Cash and other stuff. Eventually, Tornado Cash will probably be ruled illegal, and Tornado Cash runs on Earth, which is under some physical jurisdiction, and so probably some lawyers and politicians will shut it down. They're going to get sued eventually, and then they'll shut it down. Somebody else will open it, so this is a cat and mouse game. But the thing is, Tornado Cash runs on there's an amount of liquidity that you need. So, the Pirate Bay got shut down too, but it just came back up. It's very resilient. Why? It's not really illegal in certain places, and maybe Tornado Cash isn't. But you also need you don't need that much liquidity on BitTorrent, on the Pirate Bay to run a successful tracker. You only need one seed to run a network. Tornado Cash is not the same way. Tornado Cash needs a certain amount of funds coming in to mix to have the funds come out clean. So if they can successfully shut down Tornado Cash and there's not enough new people coming online, then it will still be online, but the transaction capacity will be very low. So effectively, you'll lose all your money. Effectively, you will not be able to clean your money fast enough to practically use it. That's a better way to say it. So, Errolson, I hope that answers your question. What's up, Beetlejuice? For sure. Thank you. I really appreciate y'all taking the time to show up for this. Those houses are using regular power now. Yeah. So if the houses were using solar power and then they got bumped because someone cool wants to use solar power for Bitcoin, now those houses are using coal. It's a good possible environmental solution. Set up solar Bitcoin farms. No, that is not a solution. If you're able to make solar farms, this is fungible. So here's the problem. Can't think of a good analogy. I only use good analogies. Electricity is a network, and if you take electricity out of one part, it's the same as taking it out of another part. If you are using electricity, it doesn't matter if you're using it for coal, if you're using it directly from nuclear, if you're using it from anything else. It really doesn't matter, assuming that the network is connected, which is partially true. So you might get me there. But if you're going to use solar power to power Bitcoin, it's the same as using coal to make Bitcoin. It's a mix. The whole thing's mixed together. Bit unrelated. I'd like to know how bridges and why it's insecure. I have to go in 15 minutes. Did I miss you already? The assets under management far exceed the value of the engineering resources for the bank. So if you've got Fort Knox, you've got a lot of gold, you put it in Fort Knox. Fort Knox is a secure facility in the United States that stores gold. It's in a lot of movies. They hack Fort Knox. In Goldfinger, 007 Goldfinger, they get into Fort Knox. Other movies too. But you have to have a lot of security to hold that much gold. What is the value? What is the value? So Fort Knox is a secure military installation that's supported by U.S. law, U.S. military, satellite coverage. It goes underground. They're storing $300 billion. Some of these bridges have billions of dollars. So these bridges have billions of dollars of assets, Australian dollars, under management, and they have zero security. There's no military protecting them. They're just secure because a couple, and maybe one person controls the whole thing, like Tether, USDT. One guy, probably in Hong Kong, without a banking license, holds billions of dollars. So that one person has a significant amount. So what's the funding? Tether has $82 billion under management. And there's probably one person who could just take all the money. Zero security. Fort Knox has $300 billion under management, and they have a whole military. So if you're going to steal money, would you rather steal $300 billion from Fort Knox. You have to defeat the military, schlep the gold bars, and they've been preparing this forever. Or do you just need to go after this one person somewhere in Hong Kong who probably has zero OPSEC because they think they're secure because they don't publish their address online, even though they're a bank. They're probably not even regulated. And then you get $82 billion. So you could spend $5 XKCD attack and get $82 billion, or you can raise an army and get $300 billion. One of them has a better return on investment. And so that's why L2 bridges are getting hacked. Too much money under management and very little OPSEC. Yeah, and I'm being facetious on some of this stuff. Does Vitalik personally have the authority to take hundreds of billions of dollars out? No. But it doesn't matter to you if Vitalik takes your money, right? If Vitalik says, we're going to take your money, and this happened before, then you're going to be pissed.